Well, I don't usually do videos on these champion rebalancing because generally they do 2, maybe a month, and most people don't even have them, so I usually don't care to watch videos on people I don't even have, so I don't know how many of you are watching this, but in this particular case, I have one of the champs they rebalanced, and I guess the other problem is often when they do rebalance them, they just, I don't know, they tweak them, but they basically still leave the champ vault champ. So in this one, I actually think they did a pretty strong buff to one of the champs, and they buffed a champ that I have. Now, did they do a strong buff of the champ I have, or did I have the other one? That's what I'll get into on this one. Before I do that though, if you start a brand new account today, just click the link in the description below and you can start a brand new account with Narma, a great poisoner for clan boss to start with. You get 3 epics, best epic in the game, Uugo, along with Mausoleum Mage and Anax. Just follow 4 steps. Step 1, log out of Plarium Play on the PC and uninstall. Step 2, click the link in the description, register with a brand new email. Step 3, launch raid, complete the tutorial. Step 4, go to your inbox, claim Narma, progress, get the 3 epics, enter the code Desert Queen, grab yourself a 2 Honorak right when you start, and log in for 7 days and you get Michelangelo, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Crazy start raid. All right, so back to the buffs. So the one champ they did is typically they do, generally they pick the worst mythical champ in the game and they buff him. Thankfully, I have the worst mythical champ in the game then apparently, because I have Fjorad. And the one they buffed before him was Fjorad, and I had that one too. So I had only 2 dwarf mythicals, and both of them needed buffs. So yeah, Fjorad I actually do enjoy. So I think he's a good nuker. So Fjorad, I had to look in my account to even find where he was. I've never used him. But I'm not going to read this whole thing to you because I think you can pause and read. I'm not going to force it to you. But I'll at least go through what did they change. And then I'll talk about, all right, is the buff effective? Is it a good to get the champ out of the vault? Or should you be excited to pull him in the future for the 99% of you that don't have him today? So on the A1, they did he already has an A1 where he's got a freeze. They changed it so that it can't be blocked or resisted if the target is a champion from the Galen Pact. Okay, so if I'm fighting someone from the Galen Pact, that's a nice buff because it blocks or resists the target. The enemy can't block or resist it. If they have stone skin, doesn't matter. Wanda submission can bounce back. It's really if they have block debuffs or you don't have enough accuracy on your champ, but only from the Galen Pact. If you're not fighting someone from the Galen Pact, then this skill wasn't changed. So A2 attacks all enemies. He's got a freeze debuff, and it can't be blocked or resisted if they're from the Galen Pact. So once again, if you're fighting someone from the Galen Pact, which, boy, I don't know how many battles in this game I know exactly which pact I'm going against, and they're only from that pact. But in that case, you can't block or resist. So once again, fantastic if they have block debuffs, a Siphi went first, or you don't build enough accuracy because you built him for a damage dealer. Also decreases the turn meter by 30%. That's a nice buff to the skill because it does lower their turn meter. And if the enemy's from the Galen Pact, decreases the turn meter by even more. So on the passive then, whenever this champ or an ally, so it used to be just this champ. So now it's this champ or an ally receives a debuff from an enemy, he's got a chance to freeze them. So that's cool. That does take accuracy though, unless they're from the Galen Pact again. So if you're fighting Galen Pact enemies, this skill set, this part of the kit, the base form, was a very nice buff. So, if we just look for a second at who's in the Galen Pact, the big one here is Marius. So Marius is everywhere, particularly if you're not early progression where a lot of people don't have Marius yet. But the farther you get into the game, the longer you play it, the higher you get in any of the arenas, the more you see Marius. So nice counter to Marius. You do have Wukong in here where you're going to get him on more levels. Gallius and Mezamel will be used at higher ends. You got Nishak in there who shows up with bombs. And then Orcs, Geralt, and Ashnar can definitely show up. And then you've got the Packmaster and his Hound, Krokod. So those two are definitely prevalent now after the events they've had recently. So you do have some champs that show up in Arena. Obviously, a whole lot of factions that aren't covered in that. And then PvE, it's hard to say you're going to target enemies against that. It doesn't work against bosses. So his first form was a decent form. So that form was decent. So at least the ones that weren't buffed that much on that form, you'd argue, well, at least that was his better form anyway. So let's get to the second form, and then I will come back to the big picture for him and talk about that. So on his second form, this is where he was supposed to be a nuker, but he just doesn't hit hard. So nobody used the second form. Well, on this form, he's got an A1, which will now ignore 15% of the target's defense. If the target's under a freeze, it ignores 35% of the defense. So in theory, that can actually do more. And if he kills an enemy, it resets the cooldown of one of his skills. So good skill, nice buff if it does damage. Now, it doesn't say damage multiplier increased here. So I don't think his A1 was particularly powerful. So if you don't kill somebody, you're not getting the benefit of this anyway. So they at least buffed it. That's about all I can say. Without knowing multipliers, you don't really know what it means. So on the A2 AoE, we've seen that each hit decreases target max HP. Damage multiplier increased was the one increase. This, for some reason, Raid wants to keep those things secret. People end up doing math or go to coding and find it out. They put it on websites, so it gets out there eventually. Why don't they just tell us? Just give us the multipliers. But Raid doesn't. They want to like pretend somehow they're secret. I don't know. But anyway, they don't tell us. So damage multipliers were increased. So the A3, it already ignores defense, and then if they're under freeze, we'll ignore 100% of the defense and block damage buffs instead. So that's a nice buff because block damage can be prevalent out there. So that's a nice buff to the A3. And this was the skill that did the most damage historically. So they've damage multiplier increased. It goes through block damage, 100% defense if they're frozen. And if you kill a target while under a freeze, which in this kit so far, he hasn't placed it yet on this form. So that's kind of a problem. Also places a block revive debuff and places a freeze debuff on all enemies for one turn. So I guess it made more sense if you were coming back around to this skill and they were already frozen, or you brought somebody else who does freezes, or you used his first form to freeze and then flipped into the second form and still had enough time to kill people. Yeah, it's a lot. And then his passive on here counterattacks with this skill whenever an enemy increases his cooldown of his skills. And whenever an ally is killed, he's got a 50% chance to place a freeze debuff on all enemies for one turn, which increases to 100%. Can't be blocked or resisted by enemies from the Galen Pact. So another place where Galen Pact really helps. So definitely buffed on this form. The block damage ignore, the allies being added into where if an ally's killed, he can freeze. And then the freeze can't be blocked or resisted by enemies of the Galen Pact. So more added in here. And it's not as bad as just the Galen Pact on this form because the damage multipliers are increased. If they increase them enough. He's still an HP-based nuker, so a lot of times they don't really do strong enough buffs on those guys. So big picture stepping back, downsides of this buff for him. Do I feel like he was the big buff they did and I've got him? Or is this just they buffed a champ I have, but man, I still don't know if I'd want to use him. Unfortunately, I think he's more in the latter. So it's a mythical champ. So I think epics should be better than rares. Legendaries better than epics. Void legendaries better than legendaries. And when they first put mythicals out, I think there was are mythicals just going to make legendaries the new epics? And the first two mythicals they put out were a different skill set. They could transform, but they weren't crazy versus the legendaries. So there was hey, it's just a different type of champ. They don't make the legendaries less powerful. Well, fast forward 2 years now, and we've got mythicals that clearly the mythicals are the better champs in the game now, so they should be better than legendary champs. So you put all these conditional skills on a mythical? I don't want to pull a mythical from a primal shard, and I finally get a mythical, and now I got to find enemies that are from the Galen Pact for him to do his best work. I can't control that. I can't off the top of my head in PvE say, where is it that Galen Pact champs are the place I'm going to go bring this guy out of the vault for? Or I'm going to go into the arena and I'm going to target Galen Pact champs because they're going to have a whole team of Galen Pact in the live arena. So yeah, you can say, ooh, they put Marius in. Do I consider using them? They put the Packmaster and the Hound in. Do I consider using them? So there is that situation. But I shouldn't be using mythical champs in those situations. So I hate the fact that the kit is so based off of one alliance in Raid, and the other three alliances are just ignored for a good portion of both sides of this champs. I find that frustrating. Stone Skin's still a big counter. If you're putting them into PvP content, which is where they said this buff was more focused, I didn't read you the text they put, but they did say it was a PvP basic buff. I still have Stone Skin against these type of abilities. And Wand of Submission. So Stone Skin's a full counter. He can't freeze anybody when they're on Stone Skin. And he can't really do damage through Stone Skin. He doesn't have any Ignore Stone Skin, Ignore Shield, so he's not going to overpower them in Stone Skin, and he's not going to strip their Stone Skin, and he's not going to freeze them in Stone Skin. So Stone Skin's a full counter. Wanted Submission, he tries to freeze people throughout a fight. He's going to be frozen himself because Wanted Submission's everywhere now in where I fight, and this freezer is just going to bounce back at him. So I think he's going to be frozen more than he freezes people in today's meta. So then you got to start thinking, well, could I put him in pinpoint? Well, I wouldn't want to put him in pinpoint. I'd rather put him in protection sets because you put him in a 9-piece protection set and you can protect all those buffs, or you put him in a damage build, or I got to put him in a 4-turn Stone Skin, 4-turn damage build, in which for the second form. So I'm making him a nuker, but once that Stone Skin wears off, now he's frozen. So I feel like they don't really understand their own meta when they give all these champs freeze abilities. Give me a passive that he can't be frozen, like Tormund. Wait, Tormund freezes himself. Like Dark Elhain. Give me a passive like Dark Elhain. Give him Dark Elhain's passive, and he's now a nice mythical because he can freeze people. If that bounces back to freeze him, boom, he puts his A3 or his A2 out there, or even just give me the A1. Don't make it a Dark Elhain nasty hit, but give him an ability to take a turn instead, So that would have been a nice kit to give him. Spirit Affinity, that's just off meta these days. You really don't want your nukers in Spirit Affinity generally, and he's a Spirit nuker, so less helpful. You need accuracy. If they're not from the Galen pack, which I don't know how you build him for PvP and assume you're only bringing him in against Galen packed enemies, and those are the ones he's going to do damage against, you need accuracy to land all these freezes. And do you want to build him with enough accuracy for PvP? You're going to nuke his damage. So that's the frustrating piece of the Galen pack portions of this, is it means you've got to build him with accuracy if you want him to land the freeze across arena, or you're only assuming he's going to hopefully freeze Marius. But they put a turn meter reduction in on the skill set, by the way. So if you don't freeze Marius, you are going to try and reduce his turn meter, and he's going to nuke you. Anyway, what's my last one? So, I guess the other thing I thought is, okay, well, he does have the ability with debuffs. So if I'm back on his first form where he'll start out, and whenever this champion or an ally receives a debuff from an enemy, he's got a chance to freeze. So for champs that start out like Calvalax and drop a bunch of poisons at the start of the fight, you do have a chance then to freeze a Calvalax. But I guess you got to hope that's not a high awakened Calvalax, because otherwise he's going to die before he takes his turn. Or you got to put him in like 4-piece Stone Skin, 4-piece, something else, so that way he can stay alive or not get those poisons, but the rest of your team can. So, and then Fabian, if Fabian goes before you, he's just going to strip your buffs, so he doesn't really debuff. So I still feel like this champ, to be effective, would have to go first, or you never take advantage of these skills, of these kind of bounce backs, because you can just have your team locked out by Armands or Fabian. And yeah, you can freeze Armands or Fabian, but those guys have already done their damage. So I already have that with Armands today. He'll probably become stunned himself, but he's already stunned everybody else or done his job. So unless you're using him as a lead, and then hopefully he freezes Armands or Fabian before they can use their skills on everybody else. But Fabian opens up with a decrease duration, and so therefore Fabian's first skill is not actually going to place a debuff. So Fabian can actually just take your team skills away, and he doesn't get frozen. Armands is going to try and put a stun up and freeze everybody. So if you had him up on the turn order, you could potentially freeze Armands before the rest of your team gets frozen. So there's some play there, but it's conditional again. So he builds on... So the builds, you're going to want a PvE like support build in the first form, but the second form is a nuker. So I guess you could just have presets set up. I want to put him in the debuffer support form with high accuracy in the first form, but the second form, if I'm using that in an arena, I want to have him as a nuker, so I can have a nuker build. But if I go into live arena, I'm probably going to sit in there wondering, which build is he in? I don't know if I can actually put him in a draft, because I don't know if he's in the nuker build or the support build, and I don't want him as nuker in the PvP right now, so I don't know what build it is, so I can't pick him. So I guess unless you always leave him in that build, but I could see myself going to live arena, not knowing what builds he's in. There are some synergies that I do think were good in this, though. With dwarves, he is a champ. Then if I just go back into the game, he is a champ in the dwarf faction, which for only is an HP-based nuker, and Fjorad actually increases the HP of the allies. So he does have synergies with Frolny now, so I do like what they can do within the same faction. And I have both of them, funny enough. So, I could be, from a siege team perspective, that could be some fun. Commodus and Fjorad could be an interesting combination that he could help make Commodus teams better. You can pair him with a Gurgo who does freezes, removes buffs, and damage boosts against enemies with a frozen. So the two of them together on a freeze-based team could be a lot of fun. And as I said, he's a good counter to the Marius and Pact Master Hound teams if you want to bring him in, if they're not in Stone Skin or Wand. So big thing will be what damage multipliers he gets that'll really drive his value. Anyway, that turned into a lot more than I expected. On Fjorad, let's go to Toghren. The Toghren buff I'll go through pretty fast. I think this was an excellent buff to this champ. I think it made him far more effective. So he already has an A1. They boosted it from, I think, a 20% chance to a 70% chance. So it books up to a 100% chance of applying a buff spread, taking one random buff from each ally and placing it on all allies. So if you put him in a 9-piece protection set, the way that works is when he does the buff spread, he will actually end up protecting the buffs that he spreads. So it's one random buff. So if you have increased speed on everyone, then he's not going to do anything. So it's got to be a buff that's on some allies, but not other allies, for it to be spread and actually do something. But in that case, I think he spreads it with a protected buff if the 9-piece protection set procs. And he's got 4 other buffs in here, so 9-piece protection set on him I think would be powerful. Then on his A2, he's got some heals, he puts increased speeds, and now they added a continuous heal buff and a block debuffs on all allies for 2 turns. That's a great skill. It's a continuous heals, block debuffs, it's increased speed, 3 buffs. So if you got him in that protection set, that's now 15% more damage if you're putting him in long fights, and you can help your team get faster, healed, and protected from block debuffs. It's a great skill. And then on his A3, removes all debuffs from all allies, increases the turn meters, even more for every debuff removed. Now, it depends on the timing. If you just put block debuffs up, they might not have many debuffs to remove. But if they do have debuffs, he removes them. You do more turn meter increases, and he puts increased accuracy up too. So now you've got 4 buffs that he could have on the team, which is 20% more damage, and we're about to hit the passive where he gives the team 10% more damage or 20% more. So that could be a 30% to 40% more damage by him being on the team. So I do think he is actually quite viable in some Hydra and Chimera type teams where you're trying to do damage. I guess in theory you could put him in an arena-based team. I don't see him making the meta, but if you're progressing, he certainly does. That's still a lot of increased benefits here. You're getting turn meter, increased speed, continuous heals, block debuffs. He's still a good support champ in progressing arena. But I think PvE, particularly those boss fights, I think that's a great skill set. And then he's increases his champ's max HP every time he uses a skill, and the allies max HP every time they do a skill. I don't know if these 250% stack up and you could actually give your team 100% more at max HP. That's crazy. But even 50% more at max HP. He's on a Hydra team with Duchess, and Duchess has 100,000 HP, and he's getting her up to 150,000 HP or 200,000 HP. That's pretty valuable. So you increase the max HP, you put increased accuracy, you're boosting turn meters, increased speed, continuous heals to heal the team, a straight up heal of 20% of his max HP, which you can make high, block debuffs, and he keeps spreading buffs. That's a great skill. That's a great kit. It's a synergistic kit. The only tweak I'd love to make is I'd love for him to remove all debuffs and then place block debuffs on the same skill instead of having those on 2 different skills. But I'll still take it. I still think that's a great kit. I really do. I think that's a big buff. So 9-piece protection set on him. I think he's awesome. He can go into Titus teams and run them on full auto. You won't get as much damage as you would on manual or using other comps. But if Titus loses his shield buff, this A1 would allow that to come up at 100% chance. So, I think he will definitely be used in Titus-based teams. I think he is now, and he's even better now. So, yeah, I think that's a great buff. I really wish that had been the Fjorad type buff. Now we'll see. If they made Fjorad's damage multipliers like they did with Sigfrid when they did his buff, they just made that nuke crazy. I don't think they're going to do that. It's an HP-based nuker. But if they did, then all of a sudden I'll take everything back and that Fjorad buff was great, and I'll make him a nuker in the A2 form. I doubt it. The whole Galen pack thing just irritates me beyond belief on that, though. So anyway, far longer video than I was going to make on this topic. If anybody's still watching this, you got to like and subscribe now, right? You made it this far. So, hey, I appreciate you watching. Have a great day. Thanks.